Welcome to the Northeast Shadow MPC with Clive Owen LLP, Recognition PR, and the Northern Echo. In this session, we regularly talk to business leaders from different sectors about what their businesses think the outlook is like and how they think the real Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee should act when it comes to the issue of interest rates, which they will do, and on Thursday there'll be an announcement. Well, the European Central Bank went ahead with its first interest rate cut since 2019 last week. However, the US interest rates are to be cut only once this year, according to updated forecasts from its central bank, the Fed. We're holding this meeting before the inflation figures are announced for the month of June. They'll be announced on Wednesday. But let's see if our members think now is the time to follow the ECB and vote for an interest rate cut. I get a vote as well because I run a business. So we're going to start with Paul Gibson. We're not going to ask you what you think about the rate cut yet, Paul, but what do you feel about the general economic climate and what your clients are thinking and doing in the wealth sector, because you advise wealthy individuals?
Absolutely. Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, from a financial advice point of view, wealth management, pensions, investments, following a recovery in 2023, it's been pleasing to see that continue into 2024. So after what's been an extremely volatile time, pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID, clients are now enjoying some positive returns, which is always nice to see. And secondly, we're starting to see the interest rates in banks starting to fall. So even though we haven't had a rate fall as such, people and the rates that they're getting on fixed-term deposits that are maturing are now coming back to see me and saying, Paul, where we could get 6% plus 12 months ago, these rates are now probably 20-25% lower. So the appetite for risk and going back into investments as well is certainly starting to show in our sector.
What's your view on the inflationary risk in the economy? I noticed data on pay growth is down from like 6% plus to 2.2%.
Yeah, so we are getting towards that target of inflation, where we always predicted it could be during the summer of 2024. I think wage demands are starting to ease slightly. We, like many other people, have been struggling to recruit, mainly down to wage demands of others. So it seems to be a merry-go-round in our sector of administrators and advisors moving companies and getting significant pay rises. We've had a little bit of success in the last 2 weeks of getting staff, and I think that's mainly down to people being more realistic around the wage demands.
Okay, well, we're talking about people there, so let's go to Donna James from Populous. Obviously, you're a recruitment specialist. What is your sector like at the moment, and do you see wages stabilising?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. And I think we are seeing a return to growth in our sector after quite a depressed first quarter. We are seeing people recruiting. However, we are also seeing still very high wage demands. So that pressure is still there on wages in our sector and for our clients.
You do specialist STEM kind of recruitment, don't you? It's not administration or that kind of...
No, it's STEM and construction and life sciences, in particular in STEM. So we're seeing very high wage demands, both in this country. We're an exporter, so we're seeing it abroad as well. So that's not come down, and I'm not surprised by that because individuals are still suffering that inflation wage lag.
Okay, let's talk about another sector. Let's talk about the construction and the construction-related sector. We've got two people on from that sector, Excite Architecture and John Cartwright, who's from Constructing Excellence Northeast. Let's talk to Tim Bailey first, architects. Tim, what's your pipeline like at the moment?
Hi, morning, Graham. The pipeline actually is getting stronger and with significant benefits in terms of how the sector is feeling about the near-term future. Where that strength is coming from is not absolutely obvious. And certainly in the context of the election and manifesto pledges being unfolded, I think there are some clues in there around new towns and planning reform and so on. But the underlying pitch, I think, is that people are rather more tired of waiting for something to happen and just keen to get on with the things that they've got in front of them.
Okay, that's very interesting, Tim. Tim, we had the growth figures published last week for the 3 months to April, and it showed that April the economy had stagnated somewhat. The growth isn't particularly strong, is it?
It really isn't. And coming on, I just checked with a couple of normal points of reference, and the historic data is really not very strong at all, both in UK economic terms and within the sectoral measures. Number of organisations have been reporting, slowing or even downturns in quantities of construction materials, for example. But the forward view, and again checked across several areas of interest, is generally much, much more positive.
Okay. Let's talk to John Cartwright, who's chair of Constructing Excellence North East. In his day job, he works with Hartlepool College, the construction and built environment sector. But you were talking to all your members at Constructing Excellence, which involves the entire construction sector in North East England. What are their views on where the sector is and where growth is?
I think, good afternoon, everybody. I think it's similar to what Tim has just been saying there. There's ups and downs, there's inconsistencies, there's, despite, Tim and I working in a sector where we've got building service engineering, civils, infrastructure projects, as well as house building that's going on around the region. We take a mixed view from everybody. I did want to come on here and first of all, discuss some of the positives. So, brick supplies and brick deliveries are up for the fifth most consecutive month, which is really positive because that's a good sign of the way things are going. So that is really, really positive, and I think everywhere you look around the northeast, there's plenty of house building. But as I said, we represent everybody, not just the house builders. But touching on what Donna and Paul said there regards pay, and I think looking at education, we've struggled and really, really struggled in education, up and down the country to attract the correct staff to supply these skills for house building and the projects that's going on around the country, just because the industry's paying a fantastic salary out there at this moment in time. So we struggle to get the skills in to try and support the industry. But
and I suppose that would apply to the smaller construction firms as well. If there's
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. But I know Tim touched on some of the parties' manifestos there. In terms of house building alone, I think there's probably some unrealistic targets. One of the major parties is looking for a 77% increase in home building, and another party is looking for 135% increase in home building. And my answer is, where are you going to get the skills from if we can't get the staff to retrain, to get the skills ready for industry?
Definitely makes the college very important. All right, thanks, John. Now let's look at the general economy. We're going to always like to bring things down a bit when we talk to Martin. So Martin's from FRP. His firm helps restructuring and companies that are in difficulties. Martin, where do you see the general economy? What's your helicopter view?
I think that we have seen formal restructuring rates fall. So in terms of businesses in distress, we have actually seen the formal rates fall the last couple of months' worth of data. Inquiries and referrals into us are still relatively high, but no peak, I would say. I would say on the other side of our business, we're planning for lots of restructuring jobs at the moment. So these are solvent restructuring of group. And this is as a consequence of various, I think, political changes that are going on in the Western world, and UK companies planning for that and sort of restructuring their operations to get ready for what's to come. Similarly, in terms of business sales and our sort of planning for retirement, that's been relatively strong for the last sort of 9-12 months generally anyway. We have seen sectors have, some key areas of distress we've seen in sort of hospitality, as you might imagine, some areas of construction. I think there is some positivity out there that projects, we had a period where we had lots of clients who were contracting clients come to us, and the key message was projects were being delayed. That is certainly less so. Certainly 3 clients in particular I've been working with, those those contracts seem to be unlocking now. The challenge then moves to, as John said, getting the skills, into the businesses to be able to deliver those projects. I think that still is a challenge. One final thing I would just say is that in terms of the service sector businesses we deal with, the wage demands are still quite high in that sector. I think I saw some data to show that they're running at about 5.9%, sort of quite well above the average. And again, that, as Donna said, I think that is that cost of living lag that is still being felt. So I think there's still some of that pain to work through the numbers to see what the underlying economy really will do in the next sort of 6-12 months.
Nicola Bellaby, you're from Clive Owen LLP, our partner on this, and listening to what Martin was just saying, obviously he's in a specific type of business that wants to have some kind of activity, whether it's distress or retirement. Your company looks after an holistic range of SME businesses across the Northeast. Is there any general conclusions you can draw from your conversations with clients?
Well, at the minute, Graham, clients seem to be doing quite well in terms of their outputs, their orders that they're getting in, but it's still going back to that old chestnut, still difficulty attracting staff and pay demands from them and having to pay them well to keep them. And we've also had the national minimum wage rises, and that's had a knock-on effect as the lower paid have had to have increases, then it's gone all the way up the chain, really. But on the whole, the wage growth does seem to be softening a little bit. I think the businesses have already made those pay rises, so hopefully things will settle a little bit. And people have a little bit more money to spend at home, I think, with the national insurance reductions. Companies on the whole are riding things out at the minute. I think the elections come a little bit earlier than they were expecting, so that's created, again, a bit of uncertainty, what's going to happen with tax rates, things like that. I'm not seeing as much spending on plant and machinery. I think clients did that a lot whilst the super deduction was in place a couple of years ago, so that accelerated spending there. And the other thing I would say is that the rise in the corporation tax from 19% to 25% is really biting now because clients have had that for a full year now.
Yes.
So that one's really come into play.
It's money that could be used in other ways for investment.
That's it, yeah.
I'm on the panel as well, so I'll just give my view. My PR firm, they're a little bit sluggish on inquiries in the first 3 months of the year, but in April and May and early June, a lot more inquiries. Of course, marketing and so on for businesses is at the front end of business activity. So I think that's a positive sign, and that's what my take would be. Before we go into how we vote on the rates, the interest rates, can I just ask, by show of hands, whether or not the panel agree that the Bank of England should make a rate, should be enabled to make a rate decision during the election? There's nothing against the Bank of England being able to change interest rates during an election campaign, but there's been a lot of commentary that suggests if they changed rates, it would interfere in the campaign. In 2001, an individual member voted to put rates up. In 2005, an individual member voted to put rates up. And in 2019, 2 individual members voted to cut rates. None of those were sufficient to change. There was only 1 or 2 members on the panel that decided. But is the election a reason to not change rates? So my view is that the Bank of England should be able to do what it thinks is right for the economy, regardless of the election. So I would say the Bank of England should be able to vote to change rates if it wishes. And I'd vote for the ability to vote to change rates. If you put your hand up if you agree with that proposition. Oh, we all agree. So unanimously, we don't think the Bank of England should hold fire because there's an election. It should take the right decision. Excellent. We've got one more member joining, so we'll just bring him in just before... David, you just joined us at the right time. We were about to decide our rates on the Shadow MPC. But before we do, what's the Northern Echo been like as far as pipeline for advertising and things like that? What's the economy looking like for you?
Well, we've been so busy that I'm late.
Very good.
Yeah, it's... I think in terms of the overall situation, it's pretty good. You know, things are, perfectly reasonable. The advertising market has been relatively strong so far this year. We don't see any real storm clouds on the horizon, nothing to be too overly concerned about. It's a shame that I've missed the rest of the conversation because I was keen to hear from others about how things are going in other sectors. But generally, I'm sorry to disappoint people if you felt that there was going to be some bad news.
No, we weren't. In fact, it's been a rather measured conversation. I'm going to ask you one question because I've asked the other people the question as well. Should the Bank of England be prohibited from changing rates because there is a election on? And the consensus of the opinion on the panel is that they shouldn't. They should be doing what's right for the economy regardless of the election. What's your view?
Absolutely agree. I think it's completely irrelevant. I think the bank has independence for a good reason, and they need to do what's best in the country's interest. So I completely agree with those sentiments.
Right, let's put the panel on, the gallery view, and we're going to do our vote now. So the question first is, does anybody think that interest rates should be put up? The answer is nobody. Who thinks that interest rates should be held as they are now?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So David was 6. So I think we got the count there. Who thinks rates should be cut? 2. Right. Okay. So reasons rates should be cut. I'll start my reasons for your decision. My reason for saying rates should be cut is that growth was faltering in April. Inflation. I would caveat it on inflation remaining around where it is now or coming down. If it goes up significantly, I wouldn't want rates cut. But if inflation maintains its data and it's published on Wednesday, I think we need to get on with growing the economy, and rate cut would stimulate that. So let's go for the reasons you said a hold. Paul Gibson?
Yeah, I think, I know we've just talked about should the Bank of England be able to make changes. I think if they were and they did make a change, it's just something else to throw into the for one party or another to throw it to their advantage. The economy is actually doing okay at the moment. I know it's slowing, but it's doing okay at 5.25%. But why is it doing it? Because of the substantial borrowing. What was it, 121 billion that the government spent in addition to what it actually takes in. So I think rates cuts are coming, but I think that does need to come post-election.
Okay, next person on who said, let's see what their view was, and that was Nicola Bellaby. What was your reason for wanting a hold?
Because I just don't feel inflation is quite low enough yet, particularly in the service industry. And I would hate to see everything go wrong after all this time. Maybe next time, Graham. Maybe next time.
Okay, fine, Nicola, that's great. Let's move on to Martin Pullen. Your reason, Martin?
Yeah, I was closer than I've ever been, I think, for a cut now. But yeah, I mean, I think the forward data shows that inflation is going to bounce. So yes, they think it's going to return Q3 this year to 2%, but then it's going to rise again. And yeah, that service sector wage inflation and some other factors that are in the mix, I still think are putting pressure, and I don't think we've quite got control of that.
Okay, fine. That's fine. John Cartwright, you went for a hold.
Yeah, I can't disagree with anybody, whatever anybody said. Even yours, Graham, I think probably next time, maybe it's a quarter getting cut by, but I think just in terms of stability at this moment in time, then I think that's why I'm staying.
So stability is your reason. Thank you, John. Let's move to Donna. Your reason?
Yes, again, it's stability, and I agree with Martin. I was the closest I've been to a cut this time. I think things are positive enough for to believe that the economy is doing okay. North East Entrepreneurs, they had the most optimism in their recent survey for compared to the last couple of years. I'm a bit worried about the inflationary pressures coming through, even through OPEC, forcing members to cut production. I'm worried about future food inflation with the terrible harvest we're predicting, and those continued wage inflationary pressures. So. Yeah, hard one, but
hard one. You were on the fence, but you favour of staying. Yeah. All right, Tim, you went with me on a minority vote to say cut now. What was your reason?
The reason really is simple. That a 0.25% cut now wouldn't really gain much traction until the autumn. in terms of investment, which I think is key to driving whatever the election result is forward, and that we all need some palpable sense of direction, and I think that would give it, rather than just at the moment holding still would just be flat.
Okay, I'm with you on that, but thank you very much. David, your reason?
I just think we need to see more evidence that the inflation dragon is definitely back in his box, and I'm not convinced yet that that's the case.
Well, it's been a fascinating discussion. Thanks to everyone, including you, David, even though we're a little late, but it's great to get that take on it.
Sorry for that.
We'll see you again in the next few weeks. Thank you very much indeed for the North East Shadow MPC.